If you think your life is tough, take a look at some of the harshest places on Earth, where survival can seem more unbelievable than the landscapes themselves. Across the planet, people have built homes in the places where nature never seemed meant to support life. From sheer cliffs and frozen wilderness to scorching deserts, communities have formed in environments that constantly test human limits. Over time, people have adapted to these extreme conditions and turned them into places where life continues. Join us as we explore the most extreme corners of our planet, where survival continues in conditions that are hard to imagine. The Yellow River has been responsible for some of the deadliest floods in recorded history, including the 1931 disaster that is estimated to have caused between 1 and 4 million deaths. Stretching about 3,395 miles, it is the sixth longest river in the world and flows through 9 provinces and autonomous regions across diverse climates and elevations. The river carries the highest sediment load on Earth, and during flood season, 1 cubic meter of water can contain up to 75 pounds of silt, turning the current a deep yellow color. This massive sediment supply allows the delta to expand by roughly 8 to 12 square miles of new land each year. At its mouth in Shandong Province, dark yellow river water meets the green waters of the Bohai Sea, forming a distinct color boundary that stretches for miles offshore. As it crosses the Loess Plateau, the powerful flow erodes the landscape into deep canyons and dense networks of gullies and isolated earth pillars. South Pole Station is the coldest permanently inhabited research facility on Earth, where temperatures frequently remain below -50 degrees Celsius and have reached an extreme of about -117 degrees Fahrenheit. The station rests on an ice sheet, moving roughly 33 feet per year, requiring the geographic South Pole marker to be recalculated and relocated every January 1st. At this location, the sun rises once in September and sets once in March, producing 6 months of continuous daylight, followed by 6 months of complete darkness. To counter isolation, the station operates a hydroponic greenhouse that supplies fresh vegetables and supports a psychological stability under prolonged artificial lighting. From February through October, temperatures fall low enough to risk aviation fuel freezing, preventing any aircraft from landing or departing and leaving personnel fully isolated. The modern structure is elevated on 36 steel columns above the ice surface to reduce snow accumulation and maintain structural stability on the shifting ice sheet. Mirny mine was the first and largest industrial open-pit diamond mine of the former Soviet Union, playing a central role in establishing the country as a major diamond exporter in the 20th century. The vast crater is encircled by an unpaved spiral haul road descending from the rim to the bottom, forming a continuous transport system during decades of extraction. The gradient and length of this spiral are so extreme that BA dump trucks weighing hundreds of tons require more than 2.5 hours to travel from the pit floor to the surface under full load. The town of Mirny sits directly beside the excavation edge, where blasting and ore transport historically generated dust, affecting nearby residential areas. Under such conditions, vehicle engines must run continuously to prevent freezing. Permafrost restricts agriculture, and local diets rely primarily on meat and fish adapted to the Arctic climate. Pitch Lake is considered the largest and most abundant natural asphalt lake in the world, with a dark gray-black surface that constantly shifts over time. The asphalt acts as a natural preservation system, pulling tree branches, fossils, or objects downward, and later pushing them back to the surface nearly intact after many decades or even centuries. Large bubbles of hydrocarbon and hydrogen sulfide gas continuously rise and burst, producing hissing and gurgling sounds across the lake. During the rainy season, wide cracks collect water and form networks of naturally warm, sulfur-rich pools directly above the asphalt layer. Asphalt extracted from this site was exported to pave Pall Mall in London and the Lincoln Tunnel in New York. About 20,000 visitors and numerous geologists arrive each year, while the outer edges of the lake contrast sharply with the surrounding lush tropical vegetation. Mawsynram village is recorded as the wettest place on Earth, with an average annual rainfall of about 467 inches. This volume greatly exceeds the global average and results from its position on the Meghalaya Plateau, where Indian Ocean monsoon winds are forced upward and rapidly condense. Because humidity levels remain near saturation throughout the year, low clouds frequently drift through windows and enter residential spaces. Instead of conventional umbrellas, residents wear the nup, a dome-shaped rain shield woven from bamboo and banana leaves that keeps both hands free during heavy downpours. During the monsoon season, limestone cliffs surrounding the village generate hundreds of temporary waterfalls cascading into the valley below. The Khasi community also cultivates living root bridges by guiding Ficus elastica roots across streams, creating natural structures that withstand constant rainfall without decay. Mount Etna is the highest and largest active stratovolcano in Europe, located on the island of Sicily and known for its frequent eruptions. It is one of the few volcanoes capable of producing perfectly rounded, white volcanic vortex rings that float above the crater when gas escapes in short bursts. During summer, millions of ladybugs migrate upward and gather near the active craters to seek shelter among the warm rocks. Volcanic ash and pumice create highly fertile soil, allowing vineyards to grow directly on old lava flows and produce distinctive local wines. Continuous eruptions have covered the coastline toward Catania with black basalt sand formed from eroded lava and ash. The mountain also hosts 2 ski resorts operating on the slopes of an active volcano that continues to erupt periodically. Lop Nur is ranked as one of the 4 largest and most dangerous uninhabited regions in China and is among the driest areas on the Eurasian continent. Potential evaporation here is about 300 times greater than the annual rainfall, leading the former lake to disappear and expose vast salt flats. From satellite images, the dried lakebed forms concentric rings resembling a giant ear imprinted on the Earth's surface. Beneath the salt lies a massive potash reserve, transforming the desert into a major center for potassium fertilizer production. Between 1964 and 1996, the area hosted 45 nuclear tests, including the country's first atomic and hydrogen bomb detonations. Summer air temperatures exceed 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and ground surfaces can reach around 158 degrees Fahrenheit, yet wild Bactrian camels survive here by adapting to brackish water sources. Norilsk is the northernmost city on Earth, with a population exceeding 100,000, constructed within the isolated Siberian tundra. In winter, blizzards can bury ground floors of apartment buildings, forcing residents to dig tunnels through snow while maintaining continuous heating systems to prevent frozen water pipes. It functions as a closed city where foreign nationals require special permits, and all entry and exit activities are strictly regulated. Large-scale metallurgical operations have turned the Daldikan River red during leakage events, and sulfur dioxide emissions have damaged vegetation and contributed to respiratory health risks among inhabitants. The city endures about 45 days of polar night and 68 days of midnight sun, disrupting circadian rhythms and increasing seasonal depression rates, which is why workers receive higher wages, extended leave, and early retirement benefits to offset the extreme living conditions. The Chernobyl exclusion zone covers about 2,600 square kilometers, creating a vast, empty territory in Central Europe after the nuclear disaster of 1986. Following the explosion, pine forests near the reactor absorbed heavy radiation and became the Red Forest, where many dead trees did not decompose for decades because microorganisms and insects were eliminated. The amusement park in Pripyat, with its unopened yellow Ferris wheel, became a fixed symbol of interrupted civilian life as more than 49,000 residents were evacuated within days. Thousands of fire engines, helicopters, and military vehicles used in cleanup operations were abandoned in storage fields due to high contamination, turning into long-term secondary radiation sources. Despite an official ban on settlement, several hundred elderly residents returned to their homes, cultivating small plots of land and living in areas where radiation levels vary significantly by location. Radiation is unevenly distributed across the zone, with some main roads relatively safe, while a few feet into moss or cracked soil can produce readings thousands of times higher, requiring constant use of personal dosimeters for any movement. The Guatemala City sinkhole formed in an area built upon volcanic sediment layers composed of pumice and ash, accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years, materials that are porous and easily eroded by water. Unlike sinkholes in remote terrain, this collapse occurred at an intersection in Zone 2, a densely populated residential and commercial district of Guatemala City. The event followed an eruption of the nearby Pacaya volcano that deposited ash over the city, immediately succeeded by Tropical Storm Agatha, delivering heavy rainfall into the uncompacted ground. Rainwater infiltrated drainage systems and carved cavities within the underlying sediment, producing a nearly vertical, cylindrical void beneath the urban roadway. Tanah Barak Beach in Bali is defined by a paved road carved straight through a massive limestone formation, creating an unusual entrance that leads directly to the sea. In the local language, Tanah Barak means red land, a name that contrasts sharply with the bright white and golden limestone cliffs and the pale white sand that dominate the landscape. Instead of building a road around the rock as usual, local authorities used heavy machinery to split the limestone hill in half and open a direct route toward the ocean. The water appears clear, with a vivid turquoise tone that stands out against the smooth white shoreline under sunlight. About 90% of visitors come primarily to photograph the dramatic road cutting through the cliffs, making it more iconic than the actual beach at the end of the path. The limestone shifts from bright white at midday to golden or warm orange at sunset, and the area remains visually open because no large-scale resorts currently block the view. Skeleton Coast is regarded as the area with the highest concentration of shipwrecks in the world, with more than 1,000 wrecks scattered along its shoreline due to dense fog and hidden reefs. Strong winds continuously reshape the coast, pushing sand inland, so that many vessels once sunk offshore now lie hundreds of yards from the water in the desert. The shoreline is littered with rusting hulls and bleached whale and seal bones exposed on the sand. Powerful sandstorms can move tons of sediment and alter the shape of dunes within a single night. Despite extreme conditions, the region supports wild black rhinoceroses, the long-lived Welwitschia mirabilis plant that can survive for more than 1,000 years, and desert lions that hunt seals along the beach. The northern section of the national park has almost no road access and remains strictly restricted to limited expeditions and charter flights. The Amazon River accounts for about 20% of the total unfrozen fresh water discharged into the world oceans and represents the highest volume river system on Earth. Despite its scale, no bridge spans its main channel, and transportation across the river relies entirely on boats and ferries. Seasonal water level fluctuations create vast flooded forests, allowing fish to swim among treetops when flood stages reach their peak. The basin extends across 9 South American countries, with roughly 60% located in Brazil, and includes Marajo Island at the Atlantic mouth, which is larger than Switzerland. Calm waters support the growth of Victoria amazonica water lilies, whose leaves can reach about 10 feet in diameter and sustain substantial weight. Beneath the turbid surface exists an ecosystem that includes black caiman, measuring up to about 20 feet, electric eels capable of discharging approximately 860 volts, submerged drifting tree trunks in fast currents, and a humid environment associated with tropical diseases such as yellow fever, malaria, and Zika. Death Valley is the largest national park within the contiguous 48 United States, covering more than 5,000 square miles in an extreme desert environment. With average annual rainfall of about 2 inches, some years pass without any measurable precipitation. At Racetrack Playa, rocks weighing dozens of pounds move across the dry lake bed when thin ice sheets form, melt, and are pushed by wind at only a few yards per minute. In the Eureka Dunes, friction between extremely dry sand grains sliding down slope produces a low resonant sound known as booming sand. Roughly once each decade, rare winter rains trigger millions of dormant wildflower seeds to bloom briefly across the valley floor. Scattered remains of former mining towns, such as Rhyolite and Skidoo, document rapid economic booms and collapses during historic gold, silver, and borax rushes. The Yamal Peninsula holds Russia's largest natural gas reserves with global-scale fields such as Bovinenkovo located on Arctic tundra underlain by permafrost. The Yamal LNG megaproject and related extraction complexes are constructed directly on frozen ground vulnerable to subsidence as temperatures fluctuate. Most of the peninsula consists of treeless tundra, covered by moss, lichens, and low shrubs that survive in intense winds and prolonged polar night and polar day cycles. The indigenous Nenets population numbers only tens of thousands, yet manages about 300,000 domesticated reindeer, creating a reindeer population that exceeds human inhabitants. Permafrost layers have preserved prehistoric organisms, including the 42,000-year-old Liuba mammoth discovered in 2007. The Nenets maintain a nomadic lifestyle using conical reindeer skin tents called chum and conduct annual migrations of up to 750 miles to adapt to extreme seasonal conditions. Yellow River Stone Forest contains one of the densest and largest sandstone pillar systems in northwestern China, formed along the banks of the Yellow River. The core landscape is a canyon stretching about 5.6 miles with sheer vertical cliffs, while the Yellow River curves in an S-shaped bend through an otherwise arid terrain. The surfaces of the stone columns display layered textures and coloration produced by wind and water erosion over multiple millennia. Access to the inner valley requires traversing a steep mountain road featuring 22 sharp hairpin turns carved into the slope. Numerous pillars have weathered into forms resembling animals, human faces, or structural silhouettes as a result of uneven natural erosion processes. Annapurna holds the highest fatality rate among 8,000-meter peaks at about 32%, meaning roughly 1 out of every 3 climbers attempting the summit has died. The massif extends about 34 miles and includes 1 peak above 26,000 feet, 13 peaks above 23,000 feet, and 16 peaks above 19,000 feet. Its steep geological structure and massive hanging seracs contribute to a high frequency of spontaneous avalanches. In Sanskrit, Annapurna means goddess of harvest, yet the mountain has become one of the most lethal environments for climbers. A single trekking route crosses landscapes ranging from subtropical forests to arid highlands and eventually permanent snow-covered summits. Annapurna 1 was first climbed in 1950 without supplemental oxygen, and the region remains habitat for snow leopards and Himalayan blue sheep in the wild. Boiling Lake measures about 197 to 249 feet across and is considered the second largest boiling lake by surface area in the world. It is not a typical lake, but a flooded fumarole where surface water seeps downward and makes direct contact with superheated magma chambers beneath the ground. Temperatures near the edge range from about 180 to 198 degrees Fahrenheit, while the center boils so violently that no precise measurement has ever been recorded. Its cloudy gray-blue color comes from dissolved sulfur and minerals, creating a toxic and extreme environment where life cannot survive. Reaching the site requires a round-trip hike of about 6 to 7 miles across steep terrain, where invisible cracks along the trail release superheated steam close to ground level. Gardar BA 64 stands alone in Skapardalur Valley along the shore of Patreksfjörður in the West Fjords, one of the most remote regions of Iceland. It holds the record as the oldest steel vessel to have operated in the country, serving for 69 years from 1912 to 1981. Instead of sinking beneath the sea, the hull rests on a shallow pebble beach beside Route 612, becoming a regular stop for travelers heading toward the Latrabjarg Cliffs. The rusted steel structure in red and orange tones contrasts sharply with the grey shore, deep blue water, and surrounding mountains. Weather conditions often bring fog and light rain, giving the landscape a muted and somber atmosphere. Visitors may approach closely and touch the aging metal surface, although climbing inside the ship is prohibited for safety reasons. Amur Bay, also known as Amurski Zaliv, is regarded as the thickest and most stable freezing bay in the Russian Far East, allowing heavy vehicles to travel directly across the sea surface for months. When strong winds sweep away surface snow, the ice reveals a dark black tone, while moving water beneath produces cracking and resonant sounds across the bay. The shoreline is divided by narrow headlands, pebble beaches, and small artificial islands, sometimes marked only by a single high-voltage power pole rising above the frozen expanse. In winter, participants wear bright orange insulated survival suits and float freely among openings cut through the thick sea ice. The bay also hosts the Amur Bay International Swim, a 12-mile event held in extremely cold water conditions. The Bering Strait forms the only natural gateway connecting the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean in the north with the Pacific Ocean to the south. Big Diomede of Russia and Little Diomede of the United States are separated by only about 2.4 miles, yet differ by 21 hours in local time. The international date line runs through the center of the strait, allowing a person to stand in one place and look across to a different calendar day. The strait is also known for sudden storms, strong winds, and dense fog that frequently reduce visibility. Destroyed Town in Kazakhstan is a fully evacuated urban settlement where more than 10,000 residents departed, leaving extensive infrastructure across the Central Asian steppe. The site contains 5- and 9-story Soviet-era Khrushchevka concrete apartment blocks that now stand without doors or window glass. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, roughly 10 to 12,000 military personnel and family members were ordered to leave abruptly, rendering the town vacant within a short period. The grey concrete buildings remain aligned in dense rows with empty window frames after materials were stripped and salvaged. After more than 3 decades without permanent residents, steppe ecosystems have reoccupied the area with wolves, foxes, feral horses, and birds of prey. The surrounding flat grassland lacks tall trees, allowing the entire abandoned complex to be visible from distances of many miles. Laguna Verde is recognized as one of the bodies of water with the highest concentrations of arsenic, making it effectively a dead lake for most aquatic life and birds. The lake sits at high elevation, where temperatures often drop below freezing and can reach dozens of degrees below 0°F. Yet the water rarely freezes because dense minerals act as a natural antifreeze. Its color is not constant and turns a vivid turquoise only when strong winds stir up mineral layers from the bottom. When the air is still, the surface appears dark and dull, reflecting the chemical sediment settled beneath. The striking green tone does not come from algae, but from a toxic chemical mixture of arsenic, lead, copper, and magnesium carbonate dissolved in the water. Laguna Verde remains a key stop on 3 to 4 day jeep tours, exploring the Salar de Uyuni salt flats. Lake Superior is the largest, deepest, and coldest of the 5 Great Lakes in North America and holds about 10% of the world's unfrozen surface fresh water. Covering roughly 31,700 square miles, the lake is so vast that the opposite shore is not visible from land, giving the impression of a freshwater ocean. It experiences a phenomenon known as seashore, where water levels oscillate due to atmospheric pressure changes, causing sudden retreats on one shore and surges on another like a small-scale wave event. As an oligotrophic lake with low nutrient levels, its water is exceptionally clear, and in many areas, visibility extends beyond about 65 feet. The lake contains more than 400 islands, and on the Ontario side, a massive igneous rock formation creates a peninsula shaped like a reclining giant above the water. Kaieteur Falls is the world's largest single-drop waterfall, located within Kaieteur National Park in the Potaro-Siparuni region of Guyana and largely isolated within the Amazon rainforest. Because of its remote position, access is mainly by small aircraft landing on a narrow dirt airstrip set on a windy plateau. The vertical plunge creates dense mist, where Kaieteur swifts fly directly through the curtain of water to nest in rock crevices hidden behind the falls. Constant spray supports carnivorous plants such as sundews along the cliff edge, while downstream, the river carves a zigzag gorge extending more than 5 miles and covered with mosses and ancient ferns. The rim of the falls is also the only known habitat of the golden rocket frog, which lives inside water pockets trapped within the leaves of giant tank bromeliads. Only about 8,000 visitors reach the site each year, making Kaieteur one of the most isolated natural wonders in South America. Lake Baikal is estimated to be about 25 million years old and is regarded as the oldest lake on Earth. Its water is exceptionally clear, and in winter or during calm summer days, visibility can reach about 130 feet below the surface. Methane gas rises from the lake bed, becoming trapped in the ice during winter and later forming large circular patterns as it escapes in spring. The lake contains 27 islands, with Olkhon Island as the largest and a spiritual center of shaman belief. More than 80% of its species are endemic, including the only freshwater seal known as the nerpa and the oil-rich golomyanka fish that lives in deep water. Winter temperatures can drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the summer wind may reach speeds of about 89 miles per hour, strong enough to blow away tents and cause people to lose balance on the smooth ice surface. Cascata di Stroppia waterfall is the tallest natural waterfall in Italy, with a total drop of about 1,600 feet, surpassing all other waterfalls within the country. The cascade exists only from late spring to early summer, and disappears completely once seasonal snow and ice reserves are depleted. Its flow does not originate from a permanent river, but from overflow of the glacial Lago Niera when rising temperatures accelerate snowmelt. Discharge levels vary with solar radiation, and often peak around midday when melt rates intensify. Along the approach at roughly 7,400 feet stands Refugio Stroppia, a stone shelter built on a narrow ledge above the main tier of the falls. Mount Denali is the highest peak in North America and a member of the Seven Summits, noted for its extreme elevation and the greatest vertical relief on the continent. The massif is surrounded by major glaciers, such as the Kaieteur Glacier, extending more than 43 miles, along with deep and shifting crevasse systems. Because of its isolated height in Alaska, Denali generates its own localized weather patterns, with strong winds and temperatures frequently dropping below -40 degrees Celsius, equivalent to about -117 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill. The climbing season is largely limited to May through mid-July, as unstable ice conditions outside this window sharply increase avalanche and crevasse hazards. During winter near the Arctic Circle, prolonged darkness dominates, and mountaineering activity nearly ceases, leaving the summit largely isolated. In summer, the midnight sun provides nearly 24 hours of daylight, leading expeditions to adjust rest cycles and often move during cooler periods to reduce risk. Mount Aconcagua is the highest peak in both the Western Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, and the tallest mountain in the world outside the Himalayas, rising to nearly 23,000 feet. Its slopes feature sharp ice formations known as penitentes, ranging from inches to several feet tall and oriented toward the sun due to sublimation in cold, arid conditions. The south face forms an almost 10,000-foot vertical wall of rock and ice, ranking among the most formidable climbing faces in the Andes region. Although the normal route does not require complex fixed rope techniques, extreme altitude frequently leads to high-altitude pulmonary or cerebral complications caused by low oxygen levels. The Aconcagua Provincial Park at the base provides habitat for guanaco and Andean condor species adapted to dry terrain and persistent winds. In 1985, researchers discovered an Inca child mummy at about 17,400 feet, naturally preserved in ice as evidence of the ancient Capacocha ritual. The Karakum Desert covers most of Turkmenistan and functions as the geographic and economic core of the country. Its surface is fragmented by massive crescent-shaped dunes and wind-built sand ridges that can reach nearly 300 feet in height. Beneath the dry sands lie marine fossils and perfectly rounded concretions, evidence that the region was once submerged under an ancient sea. Within the desert stands the Darvaza gas crater, an artificial gas pit, burning continuously since 1971, with temperatures approaching 750 degrees Fahrenheit. The landscape is intersected by the Karakum Canal, extending more than 800 miles, transporting water from the Amu Darya across shifting sands and frequent dust storms. Despite an average population density of roughly 1 person per 2.5 square miles, the ecosystem supports highly adapted species such as the Persian leopard, desert monitor lizard, and Karakum sheep. Nanga Parbat is the 9th highest mountain on Earth and has recorded an exceptionally high fatality rate among climbers throughout Himalayan history. Its Sanskrit name means naked mountain, describing slopes so steep that snow and ice fail to cling, exposing massive, dark rock faces. The Rupal face on the southern side rises more than 15,000 feet from base to summit, ranking among the tallest mountain walls on the planet. In 1953, Hermann Buhl became the first person to summit an 8,000-meter peak without supplemental oxygen and completed the final section alone. Directly below the severe upper slopes lies Fairy Meadows, a plateau of pine forest and grassland that contrasts sharply with the ice and granite above. A narrow, unguarded access road combined with frequent rock and ice fall maintains a high level of objective danger even before any ascent attempt begins. Lakajigar is a fissure system extending about 15.5 miles across Iceland, consisting of more than 130 aligned volcanic craters formed during the 1783 eruption. This eruption produced the largest recorded volume of basalt lava in a single historic event and created the vast Skaftereldarone lava field. The dark lava surface is now covered by bright green Raccomitrium moss, contrasting with black tephra deposits and iron-rich rocks oxidized into reddish tones. The Skaftereldar event resulted in the loss of roughly 20 to 25% of Iceland population due to famine and fluorine poisoning from volcanic fallout. More than 80% of sheep and about half of cattle and horses nationwide died after grazing on contaminated grass, leading to agricultural collapse. Access requires high-clearance four-wheel drive travel along mountain F roads such as F206, with shallow glacial river crossings, and the area closes entirely during winter because of severe weather and terrain conditions. Planet Earth is filled with landscapes that make people long to explore. Yet in those very places, nature can end everything in an instant. Cities where the cold is so extreme that even breathing becomes difficult. Villages that hold on in environments threatened not only by volcanic eruptions, but also by storms. And floating communities on the water where danger is never more than a few rows of houses away. Places where a single mistake can mean death are exactly where people have chosen to begin life. This is not meant to make you fear travel, but to remind you that this planet is still wild and humans remain deeply fragile before its power. Longyearbyen is not just a small town of fewer than 1,000 residents near the Arctic, but a place where life is governed by rules that barely exist anywhere else in the world. And the strangest rule is that even death is not allowed to stay. Since 1950, burials have been banned because the permafrost preserves bodies almost indefinitely, so people nearing death must be transported to mainland Norway. The harshness here does not end beneath the ground, because from November to February, the sun disappears completely, leaving months of continuous darkness that bring vitamin D deficiency isolation and very real depression. In these conditions, alcohol once became a dangerous escape, even cheaper than soft drinks, because it was not taxed, forcing authorities to control purchases through ration books. Beyond the edge of the town, the greatest threat remains polar bears predators that can appear surprisingly close to residential areas. Tanna Island is a place where people live at the base of a volcano that erupts almost every day for more than 800 years. Mount Yasur continuously ejects ash, hot rocks, and fire into the air dozens of times each day, making the sound of underground explosions a constant part of life. For visitors, it is a rare spectacle, but for local residents, Yasur is a persistent threat that can cover villages in ash, contaminate water sources, and damage vegetable fields and coffee plantations. The danger in Tanna does not come only from the volcano. In 2015, Category 5 Cyclone Pam struck Vanuatu and caused severe destruction on Tanna, with about 90% of homes and structures on the island destroyed. In an environment where the ground can erupt and storms can erase entire settlements, the people of Tanna survive by observing signals from ants, birds, and wind, then taking shelter in rock caves or wooden bunkers before disaster arrives. Tonle Sap does not function like a normal lake, but like a floating world that constantly reshapes itself with the seasons. Across its surface, hundreds of floating villages exist entirely on houseboats, where homes, schools, churches, police posts, and even clinics rest on bamboo frames and metal barrels. During the dry season, the lake drains water back into the Mekong River, but when the rainy season arrives, it expands dramatically into a vast inland sea. At that time, sudden storms can raise waves reaching about 3 feet high, strong enough to overturn fragile floating houses and sweep years of possessions into the mud below. Yet the most extreme reality here comes not only from the water, but from the way people must live directly on it, as thousands of families bathe, cook, dump waste, and use the lake as a toilet. So when the dry season lowers, the water level waste becomes concentrated. Foul smells rise, and diseases such as diarrhea, cholera, and skin infections become constant threats. Grindavik was once a fishing town in southwest Iceland, but in recent years it has become the front line of an ongoing geological crisis. Even before lava appeared, residents lived for weeks in a state of intense psychological strain. Thousands of earthquakes occurred each day, enough to destroy sleep and turn every night into a period of waiting in fear. Residents reported hearing concrete cracking and deep rumbling sounds as if something was breathing beneath the ground. By January 2024, that fear turned into real loss. With the town sealed off, many people stayed in temporary housing in Reykjavik, watching through cameras or live broadcasts as glowing lava moved into their homes. They witnessed a lifetime of possessions disappear on screen, with no ability to intervene. The most extreme outcome is that Grindavik is not only losing buildings, but also the identity of a community that dates back to the Viking era. The Sahara is not just a vast sea of sand, but an environment where heat attacks the human body like a real physical force. Surface sand temperatures can reach about 176 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to cause burns after prolonged contact. Under peak sunlight, a human body can lose about 1 quart of sweat every hour, and without rapid rehydration, the blood thickens, the heart works under extreme stress, and organ failure can occur in less than a day. Yet the greatest danger in the Sahara is not only heat, because sandstorms can build enormous walls of dust that erase visibility and wipe away all traces of direction within just a few hours. Fine sand enters the eyes, ears, and lungs, making suffocation a real threat, and in 1994, athlete Mauro Prosperi became lost after a sandstorm, surviving by drinking urine and bat blood before being found 9 days later, wandering near the border of Algeria. Coober sits on the Spiti Plateau like a settlement, pushed close to the limits where humans must coexist with altitude, freezing temperatures, and prolonged isolation. The village is defined by stone and mud brick houses, painted white with deep red window frames, creating a highly uniform Tibetan-style appearance. But behind that order lies an unforgiving environment, as winters in this valley can drop to -22 degrees Fahrenheit and bury all pathways under heavy snow. When that happens, Coober effectively becomes a white island, cut off from the outside world for 6 months. Near the village stands the Chicham Bridge, spanning the Samba Lamba Canyon, more than 500 feet deep, where the terrain reveals how dangerous the distance between two communities once was. Before the modern bridge was completed in 2017, residents of Coober and Chicham had to cross that abyss, using a manually operated cable basket suspended in midair. Mesa Verde preserves one of the harshest traces of the ancient Pueblo people, where entire communities once hid directly within cliff walls. For more than 700 years, they lived on the plateau and gradually moved into large rock alcoves to adapt to an environment that was becoming increasingly harsh. Even there, survival remained fragile because water was extremely scarce and people depended on small seep springs emerging from cracks in the rock to live within a landscape that rarely held moisture. Around 1276, drought lasting 23 years pushed that entire system toward collapse as food supplies dwindled and conflicts between Pueblo groups began to erupt. Places such as Balcony House therefore served not only as homes but also as defensive fortresses with an entrance so narrow that only one person could crawl through at a time to block attackers, while archaeological evidence shows violence escalating to killings and even signs of cannibalism. Fugtalgompa is one of the most isolated monasteries in the world, attached directly to a cave opening on a steep cliff in the Ladakh region. The entire structure is built from mud, stone, and wood, not on flat ground, but pressed against the mountainside, constantly exposed to falling rocks, erosion, and partial collapse. All supplies needed for life, including food and gas cylinders, must be transported by people or pack animals along narrow paths at the edge of deep drops. More than 70 residents depend on a small stream flowing from inside the cave. So if winter freezes the water or contamination occurs, the monastery can lose its only source of supply. When snow covers the valley, the final supply route becomes travel across frozen river surfaces, where even a small crack can pull someone into fast-moving icy water. Iquitos is one of the most isolated cities in the world, and what makes it extreme is that nearly 500,000 people live there without a single road connection to the outside. It is the largest city on Earth that cannot be reached by road, so when emergencies occur, the only options are airplanes or boat journeys that can take several days along the Amazon River. Yet isolation is only the first layer of danger, because in Iquitos, the boundary between the city and the wild is so thin that anacondas entering riverside homes is not uncommon. Beneath the water, predatory fish and parasites such as candiru turn many stretches of river into genuine threats for people. On land, humidity frequently rises above 80 to 90%, keeping the city in constant heat and moisture, where clothing quickly molds, electronic devices often fail, and the human body rarely has a chance to stay dry. Yanjin, also known as Yanjin County, is globally famous as the narrowest city in the world, but the most striking fact is not the title, but the way the entire city is squeezed into a tight corridor between the Nangsi River and steep mountain cliffs. Seen from above, the settlement looks like a thin strip of buildings glued directly against the rock and stretched along the riverbank. At its narrowest point, the city is only about 98 feet wide, yet it still holds around 450,000 residents, leaving almost no space for gardens or open land. Many high-rise buildings stand on slender pillar supports like spider legs hanging directly above the water. During the rainy season, the river rises and rushes beneath the structures, turning the vibration of the current into a normal part of daily life, while even simple travel can become difficult because passing one section of road may require miles of detour before turning back. The Uros Islands are the highest mobile reed fortress on Earth, where people live on a surface that slowly rots beneath them in thin air and cold rising from the lake. Under their feet is not stone or soil, but tightly woven totara reed roots, a soft ground that stays damp, shifts gently, and can give way if the fresh reed layer above becomes too thin. That is why the Uros people almost never know real rest, because every 15 to 20 days, they must spread a new layer of reeds to keep the island from sinking and turning into marsh. Living day and night on a surface that never fully dries also wears down the body, leaving many adults with joint pain and lung problems, while children often face biting cold and skin disease. In daylight, the sun, at nearly 13,000 feet, burns skin quickly, but at night, the cold from the lake rises through the reeds and turns each home into a natural icebox. Most ironic of all, even while surrounded by a vast lake, many Euros families still lack clean water because the water around them grows dirtier and slowly damages the health of the whole community. Shibam does not just build homes in the desert, it places an entire vertical city on one of the most fragile materials humans can rely on. Towering mud brick structures rise up to 16 stories above the arid land, forming a striking skyline that has earned it the name the Manhattan of the desert. The extreme reality is that these mud structures do not merely exist, they support their own weight for centuries, representing an ancient engineering limit that time has not fully defeated. Yet Shibam exists in a constant state of vulnerability, because the entire city is built from mud and straw, and without continuous human maintenance, it will gradually collapse. Whenever heavy rain arrives, the mud walls begin to erode, forcing residents to climb to dangerous heights to reapply fresh layers of mud along with a coating of white lime at the top. This white layer is not decorative. It serves as the final barrier, preventing water from penetrating the structure below, because if this crown fails, an entire tower can collapse like a sandcastle under rain. Pripyat is a ghost city within one of the largest and most dangerous exclusion zones in the world, where human settlement is restricted for at least 24,000 years. After the nuclear disaster, about 50,000 residents were evacuated within hours, leaving behind homes, belongings, and daily life, turning the city into a preserved snapshot of the Soviet era. The Ferris wheel in the amusement park is one of the most striking symbols, as it was scheduled to open on May 1st, 1986, but never carried a single child because the disaster occurred 5 days earlier. The forests surrounding the city changed to a reddish-brown color and died rapidly after absorbing high levels of radiation, making it one of the most heavily contaminated areas ever recorded. Even so, some elderly residents have quietly returned to nearby villages to farm, drink local water, and continue living on contaminated land. When asked why they returned, many respond that war and famine did not kill them, so radiation would not either. Living in Sentinel means placing all daily life beneath a massive rock formation that humans can never fully control. From living rooms to kitchens and bedrooms, many homes here are built directly under rocks weighing millions of tons, where the sense of shelter always comes with a silent geological threat. But the extremity of Sentinel does not end there, as the narrow canyon creates a sharp contrast in living conditions within just a few steps. In the shaded street, the rock walls close in above and nearly block out the sky, keeping the street below in constant cool shadow even when the sun outside remains intense. The lack of direct sunlight keeps indoor humidity consistently high, making clothes difficult to dry, encouraging mold growth, and filling the air with the damp smell of stone and cave surfaces. Because of this, to prevent their homes from becoming enclosed and humid, many families in Sentinel still rely on dehumidifiers or heaters, even on days when the outside temperature remains warm. Wae Rebo sits isolated at an elevation of about 3,600 to nearly 4,000 feet in the mountains of Indonesia, like a village suspended in the clouds. People call it the village above the clouds, but the only way to reach it is on foot, because there are no paved roads, no vehicles, and no mechanical access routes leading to the settlement. The isolation does not end once visitors arrive, because Wae Rebo has no mobile signal, and electricity appears only for a few hours each evening from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. using a generator. Even strangers cannot enter the village in a normal way, as they must first participate in the Waelu'u ritual at the main house called Nyang Gendang, where the village leader asks the ancestors for permission before welcoming guests. At this elevation, humidity remains almost saturated throughout the year, and fog seeps into clothing roofs and bedding, leaving everything damp cold and rarely completely dry. Castellfollit de la Roca is one of the smallest towns in Spain, with an area of less than 0.4 square miles. But what makes this place hard to believe is not its size, but the ground it clings to. The entire village stands on a narrow cliff, trapped between the Fluvia and Toronel rivers, as if the whole settlement balances on a thin strip of rock between flowing water. For thousands of years, these two rivers have continuously eroded the base of the cliff, slowly cutting away the foundations of the village from below. The extremely limited space turns life here into an extreme form of density, where narrow, dark, twisting medieval streets, like tunnels, force people to exist tightly packed along the edge of the precipice. In the past, even the dead did not truly leave this cliff because the old village cemetery once stood in a precarious position directly on the rock before it was eventually relocated. Lindisfarne, or Holy Island, is not a place people can enter or leave whenever they want, but a place where the sea decides when the outside world still exists. Located off the coast of Northumberland in northeast England, the island connects to the mainland only through a raised causeway that appears when the tide goes out. Twice every day, the tide rises and completely submerges that road, turning Lindisfarne into a community cut off from the mainland for several hours, as if every connection has suddenly vanished. Even though electronic warning lights flash and tide schedules are posted everywhere, many visitors still try to cross, while the water is rising, leading to repeated rescue operations. Because of this, a wooden refuge hut stands beside the road for people trapped by the sea, and with about 160 residents' daily life, here moves according to the rhythm of the tides. So even emergencies, work schedules, and weddings must wait for the sea to allow passage. Pitcairn sits isolated in the South Pacific, like a piece of land cut off from the rest of the world, and it remains one of the most remote communities on the planet, where distance turns even the smallest accident into a survival threat. Here, a wound that might seem minor once could become a death sentence, because residents had to wait for ships traveling thousands of miles across the ocean to transport patients to Tahiti for emergency care, and many people died before help arrived. Yet the isolation of Pitcairn did not begin with medicine or geography, but with an escape when in 1789, after the mutiny aboard HMS Bounty, Fletcher Christian, together with rebel sailors, Tahitian men and Tahitian women, came to this island to hide. At Bounty Bay, they burned their own ship to erase any trace and cut off the path back to the outside world. Today, most residents of Pitcairn remain direct descendants of that group, but the population is extremely small. The gene pools continues to narrow, and aging residents are pushing the island toward the possibility of being abandoned once again. Guyaju, often called the Mysterious Stone City, is the largest cliff-dwelling settlement ever discovered in China. The entire complex contains 117 artificial caves with more than 350 rooms, all carved directly into granite cliffs. The most accepted theory suggests that it served as a refuge for the nomadic Kumoshi tribe during the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period when they fled from wars and attacks. Hiding here did not mean safety or comfort, because the Yangqing region experiences harsh winters, where temperatures often fall below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, and granite retains very little heat, turning the entire complex into something like a giant cold chamber on the mountain. Even with heated kang beds, residents still faced a constant survival challenge as they needed large amounts of firewood to warm the stone rooms, while rain channels carved into the rock roof show that every drop of water was precious, and daily water had to be carried from the mountain base up to the cliff dwellings. Merapi is called the Mountain of Fire, and that name is not just symbolic. It is the most active volcano in Indonesia, with small eruptions repeating every 2 to 3 years, and larger eruptions returning roughly every 10 to 15 years. The most dangerous threat here is not slow-flowing lava, but pyroclastic flows, massive clouds of ash and gas reaching about 1,290 degrees Fahrenheit, racing down the slopes at speeds of hundreds of miles per hour and destroying everything in their path. After major eruptions, many villages are completely buried beneath layers of ash and rock several yards thick, and the jeep roads used for tourism today often run across the roofs of those former settlements. Even knowing this, thousands of people still live on the slopes of Merapi because volcanic ash creates soil so fertile that harvests here can produce 2 or even 3 times more crops than in other regions. Schafberg is one of the most famous mountains in the Salzkammergut region of Austria, but what makes it remarkable is not only the landscape, but the price humans paid to reach its summit. The spirit of Schafberg is the Schafbergbahn Cog Railway, opened in 1893, which remains the steepest operating steam rack railway in Austria. This achievement was built with sweat and blood, because in the late 19th century, hundreds of workers carried steel rails weighing hundreds of pounds up slopes reaching about 26%, using only human strength and pack animals. At the summit, the Schafbergspitze Hotel reveals another extreme form of life where altitude and weather control every connection with the world below. During harsh winters, or when powerful storms stop the trains, the caretakers can become almost completely cut off from the outside world until the railway operates again. Escher is one of the most precarious restaurants in the world, where a single misstep can lead to a fall of nearly 4,600 feet down the Alpstein mountainside. The structure has almost no rear wall in the conventional sense, as its entire back is formed by natural rock, while the roof is angled to align with the overhanging cliff above to reduce exposure to falling debris. But the exposed position is only part of the challenge. For more than 170 years, Escher has operated with water supply dependent on rainfall and groundwater seeping through the cave, making water shortages a real risk during dry seasons. Because of this, the site does not include standard shower facilities. All waste, leftover food, and daily refuse must be packed and transported down the mountain, while refrigerators, equipment, and repair materials are delivered by helicopter positioned close to the cliff face. These operational constraints created sustained pressure, leading the family that managed the site for 31 years to leave in 2018. Aogashima is not an island designed for living, but a basalt crater where people exist within a confined volcanic basin surrounded by cliffs about 1,300 feet high. The island has almost no safe harbor, so after unloading, boats must be lifted onto land by crane because strong waves can destroy them within a single night. During the eruption in 1785, nearly 140 people died because they could not escape over the surrounding rock walls to avoid lava and toxic gases. Inside the Ikenisawa crater, the ground still releases geothermal heat reaching about 390 degrees Fahrenheit, and residents use these vents for cooking and heating. Leaving the island is highly uncertain, as there is typically only one small helicopter flight per day, and if fog arrives during a medical emergency, evacuation may not be possible. The entire population depends on rainwater and desalination systems, since there are no natural freshwater rivers, streams, or lakes available during disruptions caused by extreme conditions. Montserrat is not only a monastery, but a fortress of faith clinging to the most unusual limestone mountains of Catalonia. Located on Mount Montserrat, rising about 4,056 feet, whose name means serrated mountain, the monastery still functions today with about 70 to 80 Benedictine monks living there. Yet the real extremity of Montserrat does not lie only in its height or terrain, because during its historical peak, 13 hermit cells once stood on the sheer cliffs surrounding the main monastery. Hermits lived inside stone shelters, sometimes barely large enough for one person to lie down, cutting themselves off from the outside world for many consecutive years while maintaining near complete silence. Food was lifted from the monastery below using a basket and rope, and history records that some hermits lost their sanity, while others fell from the cliffs during violent storms as isolation and danger were seen as the shortest path toward God. Miyakajima is a place where the atmosphere has been turned into a weapon by the volcano, and here an ordinary breath can become a death sentence if you do not have a gas mask with you. Mount Oyama has released enormous amounts of toxic gas in a single day, enough that even short direct exposure can leave the throat, lungs, and eyes burning as if they had touched chemicals. The acidic air also eats away at everything faster than normal, and while it can take about 10 years on the mainland for an iron beam to be heavily damaged, here it can decay so badly that people could snap it by hand in only 1 to 2 years. About 1/3 of the island has become a long-term restricted zone, where trees died standing and turned pale after layer upon layer was stripped away by toxic gas and acid. With eruptions returning on a cycle of roughly a few decades, residents live with the feeling that what they build today can be buried again within days by ash and lava. Even children on the island are trained to put on gas masks quickly because the sound of the toxic gas alarm does not just warn them, it decides when people can eat, sleep, or run to stay alive. La Rinconada is the highest city on Earth, a place so high that human life begins to be rejected with every breath from the very start. At an elevation of about 16,730 feet, the air is so thin that many residents live in constant exhaustion, with blue lips and hearts forced to work far too hard just to keep the body going. Life here is further twisted by the Kokorio system, where miners work for 30 days without pay and get only 1 day to carry out as much ore as they can, knowing that if no gold appears, the whole month ends in nothing. To separate gold, many also burn mercury inside wind-sheltered shacks, filling the air with poison that enters the lungs and brain each day, like a slow self-destruction traded for the hope of sudden wealth. Life above ground is just as brutal, since the town has almost no waste system, leaving garbage and human waste from tens of thousands of people to collect in the streets and melt into foul mud when the sun rises. In Oymyakon, human breath can freeze almost instantly as it leaves the mouth, creating a faint crackling sound in air thickened by extreme cold. This small village in Yakutia is considered the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, with recorded temperatures dropping to minus 96.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Here, stepping outside is no longer a routine action, but more like the beginning of a direct confrontation with nature. Residents must wear up to 20 layers of clothing, weighing nearly 31 pounds, just to keep their bodies safe for a short period of time. But the cold in Oymyakon extends deep into the ground, where permafrost hundreds of feet thick makes conventional plumbing systems nearly impossible to maintain. As a result, water must be obtained by cutting blocks of ice from frozen rivers and carrying them back home. Even vehicles struggle to function, as tires can harden like stone and engines require hours of heating before they can start. Tristan da Cunha is not just remote. It exists as a community completely separated from the normal rhythm of the rest of the world. Located in the South Atlantic Ocean and about 1,500 miles from South Africa, it is considered the most remote inhabited archipelago on the planet. Its isolation is absolute, as there is no airport, and the only way to reach the island is by ship from Cape Town, a journey that takes 6 to 10 days, with only a few trips arriving each year. In 1961, the Queen Mary's Peak volcano erupted close to the settlement, forcing nearly 300 residents to evacuate to England to escape disaster. What stands out is that once the volcano became inactive, almost the entire population chose to return to this isolated island instead of staying in a more comfortable life elsewhere. Ushguli lies deep in the Caucasus, like a community held in place between high mountains, heavy snow, and a rhythm of life almost separated from the modern world. At an elevation of about 6,900 feet, it is considered one of the highest permanently inhabited settlements in Europe. But its most defining feature is the stone towers rising vertically throughout the village. Each tower serves not only as a home, but also as a private fortress for each family, built to defend against invasions and even conflicts between clans. Yet altitude is not the harshest factor, because for around 6 months each year, snow falls so heavily that it buries the lower sections of many towers. The only road leading into the village is frequently blocked by landslides or buried under snow, leaving Ushguli almost completely isolated from the outside world. Henningsvær is not simply the Venice of the North, but a village forced to exist on the edge of Arctic Ocean rock. Even Henningsvær Idrettslag Stadion, often described as the most scenic football field in the world, is actually an isolated pitch set on bare rock, separated from deep, cold water by only a narrow strip of asphalt and without protective stands. For those unfamiliar with this environment, just 15 to 20 minutes of activity can lead to nausea, dizziness, and exhaustion, turning an ordinary match into a physical challenge in cold wind and dense salt air. The extreme nature of Henningsvær does not end at the stadium. The entire village is fragmented across uneven rock outcrops and small islands, forcing schools, churches, and residential areas to fit into narrow patches of available land. When winter storms pass over the small bridges connecting the village, even visiting a neighbor can become a journey that must be planned against the conditions of the sea. Coober Pedy is an underground city where an entire community has moved below the surface to avoid extreme desert heat. Surrounding the town are more than 250,000 unmarked mining shafts, creating a hazardous landscape where a single misstep can lead to a fall of about 100 feet. During summer, surface temperatures can reach around 175 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to cause severe burns almost immediately and deform vehicle tires left on the ground. Even underground, risk remains present, as mining tunnels contain fine dust particles sharp enough to cause long-term respiratory damage after prolonged exposure. On the surface, natural vegetation is nearly absent, and the lack of greenery has led some residents to install artificial metal trees to improve visual conditions. The entire town depends on a single pipeline that brings water from distant underground sources, meaning even a minor failure can disrupt supply within a short period of time. Masule was not built like a normal village, but as a tiered settlement tightly attached to the steep mountainside of Iran. Motor vehicles are completely banned here because the roads are actually the rooftops of the level below, and these surfaces were never designed to support the weight of cars or motorcycles. The concept of a private yard almost disappears because simply opening a window or stepping outside means you are standing directly on the ceiling of your neighbor below. The unusual part is that these rooftops that function as walkways are mainly made from mud, raw bricks, and wood, yet they are still strong enough to handle thousands of people passing over them every day for centuries. Living in Masule also means climbing slopes almost your entire life, because across the entire village, there is almost not a single truly flat surface. From going to the market, carrying food, transporting construction materials, to visiting a nearby house, every daily activity here takes place on a living system, suspended at an angle along the mountain. The world holds places that were never meant for human survival. Not because they are remote, but because the environment itself actively pushes life away. Deserts where heat can warp metal within minutes. Mountain peaks so high that every step becomes a fight against thin air. And landscapes where a single mistake can erase you without a trace. Yet somehow, humans are still there. They build, they live, and they adapt in conditions nature never intended to support. These are not just dangerous locations. These are places that test the absolute limits of human survival. And this journey will take you to environments where simply standing still is already a challenge. Can you believe that a single volcano possesses the power to consume an entire army and generate hundreds of acres of new land in mere moments? Kilauea in Hawaii proved this devastating force by erupting continuously for 35 years and causing the deadliest volcanic disaster in United States history when an explosion in the year 1790 killed over 400 people. That fury returned in the year 2018, when molten rock boiled away the largest natural freshwater lake in the state and added over 875 acres of fresh land to the Big Island. Decades earlier, the Halemaumau crater housed a massive and persistent lava lake that bubbled violently for over a century before vanishing in the year 1924. Most terrifying of all, the lava flows can surge at speeds of 17 miles per hour during peak pressure, making it nearly impossible for anyone to outrun the molten river. Bogdanovich Glacier stands as the most accessible death trap on Earth, perched at a staggering altitude of over 11,000 feet above sea level. Deep beneath your feet, hundreds of feet of ice shriek with thunderous explosions as millions of tons of matter shatter under immense pressure. Vertical ice mills create bottomless abysses ready to swallow anyone into a dark, freezing subterranean drainage system where life is erased in minutes. The environment is treacherous as lethal ultraviolet rays scorch the skin before temperatures plummet below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly turning sweat into jagged ice crystals. Hikers must navigate a chaotic battlefield of jagged ice towers as tall as 5-story buildings that can collapse without warning to crush everything with eternal force. The ultimate horror lies in the shifting ice that slowly unearths mummified remains from centuries ago, preserved as a macabre museum within the frozen heart of the mountain. Namib Desert is considered the oldest desert on Earth, where arid or semi-arid conditions have persisted continuously for about 34 to 50 miles of geological time, measured as 55 to 80 million years. Within this vast sand landscape, many dunes rise more than 980 feet high, approaching the height of modern skyscrapers and forming long ridges of shifting sand that extend for many miles. Along the western edge of the desert lies a fog-covered coastline, influenced by strong, cold ocean currents, where thousands of shipwrecks and whale bones once led ancient sailors to describe the region as the gateway to hell. Across hundreds of miles of desert surface appear thousands of bare circular patches surrounded by grass, a phenomenon known as fairy circles, whose exact origin remains debated among scientists. In a region where rainfall is extremely rare, certain animals, such as the namib beetle, survive by tilting their bodies to collect fog from the ocean wind and condense it into droplets of drinking water. In several clay depressions within the dunes, dark acacia trees that died centuries ago remain standing because the air is so dry that natural decomposition occurs extremely slowly. Hidden beneath the ground, Cenote Dos Ojos opens a gateway into the Sac Actun underwater cave system, extending more than 215 miles, the longest known flooded cave network on Earth. The limestone corridors are so narrow and complex that many professional divers must remove air tanks to squeeze through rock passages leading into sections of complete darkness. Deep inside the cave, a phenomenon called halocline forms where fresh water above meets salt water below, creating a shimmering optical boundary that resembles a floating underground river. Because rainwater slowly filters through thick limestone for thousands of years, the water in Cenote Dos Ojos becomes exceptionally clear with underwater visibility exceeding 300 feet. When sunlight passes through cracks in the cave ceiling, it produces intense beams of light that descend through the deep blue water like columns inside a vast subterranean chamber. In the deepest dark sections, explorers have discovered human skeletal remains more than 12,000 years old, together with numerous fossils dating back to the Ice Age. The Grand Prismatic Spring is the largest hot spring in the United States, earning the title of the world's most vibrant Eye of Death, with a surface wider than a football field. Hidden beneath that beauty is a depth of 121 feet, boiling at 189 degrees Fahrenheit, with the power to scald any life. The emerald green at the center is actually an absolute sterile zone where extreme temperatures have created a pure prism reflecting direct sunlight. In the past, tourists often threw coins into the spring, but this has been banned because metals contaminate the water and alter the natural colors of the bacteria. Every minute, this massive geothermal engine erupts approximately 555 gallons of hot water, acting as a direct pressure relief valve for the magma. Yet the ground around the spring is incredibly thin and brittle, meaning any misplaced step can lead someone directly into the scalding and acidic mud. Sigiriya is often called the sky citadel of the ancient world, where a royal fortress was built directly on top of a massive rock rising about 650 feet above the surrounding landscape. To construct stairways, terraces, and corridors along the nearly vertical rock face, thousands of workers had to carve directly into steep stone surfaces under extremely dangerous conditions. The fortress was created during the 5th century when King Kashyapa seized the throne and transformed the isolated rock into a defensive palace to avoid retaliation from his brother. At the summit, ancient builders designed royal gardens and a large water reservoir demonstrating advanced hydraulic engineering for the period. The only path to the summit requires visitors to walk through the gigantic stone lion claws, which remain from a once towering guardian statue that was meant to intimidate intruders. Along the famous Mirror Wall, researchers have recorded more than 600 ancient poems written by visitors, which provide valuable evidence for the historical development of the Sinhala language. The meeting of waters in Brazil is a remarkable river confluence where the dark Rio Negro and the muddy Solimões River of the Amazon system flow side by side for several miles without mixing. From above, the rivers form a sharp, visual boundary across the surface, one side appearing dark, like coffee, from decomposing forest material, while the other carries yellow-brown sediment eroded from the distant Andes. This separation results from strong differences in flow speed and temperature as the Solimões moves quickly at about 2 to 4 miles per hour, while the Negro flows slowly at about 1 mile per hour but remains warmer. The water of the Rio Negro is also highly acidic, with a pH near 3.5, similar to the acidity of orange juice, creating a chemical barrier that slows the mixing of the two rivers. Because of this unusual chemistry, mosquitoes rarely reproduce along the darker riverbank, despite the surrounding tropical rainforest environment. Along the striking boundary between the two water colors, Amazon River dolphins often appear hunting fish and moving between the contrasting currents. The rock churches of Tigray in Ethiopia stand on steep sandstone cliffs and are considered one of the most difficult religious complexes on Earth to reach. To reach the sacred entrance of Abuna Yematagu, worshippers must scale sheer rock walls using only their bare hands and feet without a single harness or safety rope for protection. The extremity reaches its peak as 80-year-old monks and mothers carrying infants on their backs calmly traverse the 1,000-foot drops every day to perform essential religious rites. For 16 centuries, this impregnable fortress position has shielded archaeological treasures and vibrant ancient frescoes from every foreign invasion and the slow decay of time. Along the narrow stone ledges leading into the sanctuary, the bones of believers from centuries past remain preserved in open rock niches, creating a hauntingly beautiful cemetery suspended in mid-air. Mount Fanjing is one of the most dramatic Buddhist temple complexes on Earth, with 2 shrines built on a separate rock pillar at an elevation of about 7,665 feet. The 2 temples stand on opposite sides of the rock and are connected by a narrow stone bridge that crosses a deep mountain gap. Pilgrims reaching the summit must climb more than 8,000 stone steps that wind along steep cliffs of the Wuling mountain range. Notably, it serves as the sole kingdom for the gray, snub-nosed monkey, with fewer than 800 individuals remaining, which turns this mountain into a sacred, natural sanctuary. The most mystical experience is the Buddha's halo phenomenon, where sunlight refracting through the mist creates a massive rainbow aura around a person's shadow. This creates a magnificent visual of a celestial palace suspended in mid-air amidst the thick mountain fog. Jellyfish Lake in Palau is an isolated saltwater basin famous for hosting millions of golden jellyfish that have evolved to lose most of their stinging ability. At peak population, the lake can contain more than 30 million jellyfish, turning the surface into a moving field of orange-yellow organisms under sunlight. Each day, the jellyfish migrate across the lake from east to west and back again to maintain exposure to sunlight that supports the algae living symbiotically within their tissues. Below roughly 50 feet, the water becomes an oxygen-poor layer containing hydrogen sulfide gas that can be hazardous to humans if entered without protection. To protect the fragile ecosystem, authorities in Palau prohibit scuba equipment because air bubbles can become trapped under the jellyfish bell and damage them. After the El Niño event of 2016 reduced the population to nearly 0 millions of jellyfish, later reappeared from hidden polyp stages attached to rocks on the lake floor. Mount Hua is known as China's Death Sanctuary, featuring the Plank Walk in the Sky, located at an elevation of over 6,500 feet, which is widely considered the most dangerous hiking trail in the world. At the 1,000-foot precipice, the vertical 90-degree stone steps force climbers to grip rusty iron chains to protect their lives. Along these chains hang tens of thousands of prayer locks dangling over the abyss with the belief that their love will become immortal. These wooden planks, only 12 inches wide, represent a literal gamble, with death as official accident numbers remain unreleased each year. This impossible landscape includes the isolated Chess Pavilion, perched on a jagged outcropping where a Song dynasty emperor reportedly lost the entire mountain in a legendary chess match. Perched at the very summit of this formidable peak sits a historic tea house where every supply is carried up by human power, creating a profound victory ritual for those who survive the climb. Imagine swimming directly over the mouth of a massive waterfall as tall as 12 skyscrapers, yet never being pulled down into the abyss. The underwater waterfall in Mauritius is the planet's most magnificent optical illusion, where your eyes are deceived by white sands plunging into the deep ocean. In reality, not a single drop of water falls vertically, as only layers of sediment are swept away by powerful currents operating 24 hours a day. While the coastal waters are only 500 feet deep, they sit right next to a trench over 13,000 feet deep, creating a staggeringly extreme landscape. This deadly contrast forms an impossible natural wonder that remains active year-round without ever running dry. You can freely boat or surf right over the crest of these falls, because all the perceived danger is simply a brilliant display of light and sand by Mother Nature. Kelimutu is the only place on Earth where 3 crater lakes sit side by side on the same volcano, yet change color independently from one another at the same time. The water inside these lakes is extremely harsh, with high concentrations of sulfuric acid and dissolved minerals, creating chemical environments where almost no life can survive. Each lake behaves unpredictably, as the water may shift from turquoise to deep red or even black within relatively short periods without following a fixed cycle. Over the past 25 years, scientists have documented more than 40 separate color changes among the 3 lakes on the summit. The scientific explanation involves volcanic gases rising from the lake floor and reacting with dissolved minerals to produce continuous chemical transformations in the water. Local cultural beliefs describe the lakes as resting places for human spirits, with each lake associated with the souls of the elderly, the young, and those considered to have done evil during life. The Darvaza gas crater in Turkmenistan is a burning natural gas pit that has remained on fire for more than 50 years in the middle of the Karakum Desert. In 1971, a Soviet natural gas drilling rig collapsed into an underground cavern, and scientists ignited the escaping methane gas expecting the flames to burn out after a few weeks. Instead, the underground gas supply continued to feed the fire, turning the crater into a massive open pit of flames that has burned continuously for decades. Temperatures near the bottom of the crater can become extremely high, yet in 2013, scientists discovered communities of extremophile microbes living in the hot mud and methane-rich environment. At night, the intense red glow rising from the crater lights the surrounding desert and can be seen from distances of more than 18 miles across the dark Karakum landscape. Welcome to Lauterbrunnen Valley, where limestone cliffs rise about 3,300 feet and surround a narrow valley floor like a deep basin within the Swiss Alps. This nearly perfect U-shaped glacial valley traps a flat floor between towering rock walls and has become a major location for extreme sports, including base jumping and wingsuit flying. The valley also contains 72 waterfalls descending from massive cliffs, including the underground Trommelbach system that carries nearly 5,300 gallons of glacial meltwater each second through dark rock tunnels. These vertical cliffs have turned Lauterbrunnen into one of the most recognized extreme jumping locations in the world, while also recording several fatal accidents each year. In many cases, rescue teams must deploy helicopters to reach the steep rock faces and recover bodies from areas that are almost impossible to access by land. From the valley floor, a rack railway tunnels through Mount Eiger and climbs toward Jungfraujoch, which hosts the highest railway station in Europe. Imagine a place where the water is so clear it disappears, allowing you to suspend yourself between the planet's two massive continental foundations. This is Silfra, a massive crack in the Earth's crust, where you can dive directly into the geological boundary being torn apart between the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates. With infinite visibility, exceeding 330 feet, thanks to water filtered through volcanic rock for a century, it creates a weightless illusion that makes you feel like you are soaring through mid-air instead of swimming. Behind the crystal clarity lies a true survival challenge, as the water maintains a bone-chilling temperature between 35 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, forcing humans to use dry suits to survive the deadly freeze. This wonder is never static, but continuously expands by approximately 0.8 inches per year, causing the terrain to shift constantly after every subterranean tremor. The story of Silfra ends with a haunting mystery of bottomless, unmapped caves where darkness and optical illusions stand ready to swallow anyone who dares to challenge the limits of nature. The Lashan giant Buddha is the largest stone Buddha statue on Earth and is considered the greatest monumental sculpture ever carved directly into a cliff during the pre-industrial era. For several early centuries, the statue was not exposed but was protected by a massive wooden pavilion rising 13 stories high until the structure was destroyed by fire near the end of the Ming dynasty. Hidden within the spiral hair curls and chest of the statue is an ancient drainage network designed to channel rainwater away and preserve the stone structure for more than 1,200 years. During nearly 90 years of construction, enormous quantities of rock fell into the river below, filling dangerous whirlpools and calming the powerful currents at the confluence of the three rivers. Historical accounts describe the monk Haitong, who initiated the project, as having blinded himself to prove that the donated construction funds would not be seized by corrupt officials. Although science explains the phenomenon of the Buddha closing his eyes and weeping as the result of acid rain, the spiritual belief that the statue empathizes with human suffering remains an inseparable soul of this historic landmark. Wae is a massive underground limestone labyrinth formed from an ancient seabed 30 million years ago, with cave walls reaching heights of hundreds of feet deep inside the earth. The cave ceiling is covered with thousands of larvae from the species Arachnocampyluminosa, producing blue, bioluminescent light that resembles a star-filled sky. This striking glow is actually part of a hunting system in which the larvae suspend sticky mucus threads to capture flying insects. The bioluminescent environment is extremely sensitive, and even a loud sound or vibration can cause the entire glowing system to shut off within seconds. Inside the giant chamber known as the cathedral, the limestone formations create such perfect acoustics that world-class opera singers can perform brilliantly without any artificial amplification equipment. To truly witness this spectacle, the human eye requires at least 15 to 20 minutes of total darkness to fully adjust and perceive the radiant glow of this hidden world. Can you believe that a single rock from space, only 160 feet wide, could strike a death blow powerful enough to erase all life within a radius of several miles in the blink of an eye? Welcome to the Beringer Meteor Crater in Arizona, where the most pristine cosmic scar on Earth has remained perfectly preserved for 50,000 years, despite the relentless forces of erosion. Although the culprit was a relatively small iron-nickel meteorite, the cataclysmic impact released energy exceeding 150 times the Hiroshima atomic bomb, creating a massive basin 560 feet deep. This breathtaking landmark served as a vital training ground for Apollo astronauts because its rugged terrain and fine lunar-like dust provided a near-perfect simulation of the moon's surface. Surprisingly, this world-class geological wonder has remained entirely private property owned by the Beringer family since the early 1900s, rather than being part of the national park system. Tianmen Mountain stands as the highest Heaven's Gate in the world and the planet's most extreme adventure sanctuary, featuring a cableway with a terrifying 38-degree vertical incline. At an elevation of over 4,500 feet, you must confront a lethal glass skywalk only 5 feet wide, bolted to a sheer cliff face overlooking a bottomless abyss. Accessing the colossal natural portal formed in the year 263 requires surviving a 7-mile road with 99 treacherous hairpin turns bordering the void without solid guardrails. The physical ordeal reaches its peak as you ascend 999 steep stone steps, designed without a single flat landing to test your endurance amidst the heavy fog. This is the only arena on Earth where elite athletes dare to plunge through the mountain core in wingsuits at speeds of 100 miles per hour. Navigating this impossible narrow gap at terminal velocity represents a lethal gamble, where the margin between legendary glory and fatal tragedy is measured in mere inches. The Richat structure, commonly known as the Eye of the Sahara, is a massive circular geological formation located in the desert of Mauritania and is clearly visible even from orbit in outer space. With a diameter of about 25 miles, The formation is so vast that a person standing on the ground cannot recognize its overall shape because the concentric rock rings extend far beyond direct human sight. For several decades, scientists believed it was a giant meteor impact crater, but that idea was rejected when geologists found no minerals altered by shock pressure, such as shocked quartz. Over extremely long periods, desert wind and water gradually eroded the top of this dome, exposing different sedimentary layers that appear today as clear concentric rings. Ice caves of Iceland stand as the most dangerous ephemeral structures on our planet, existing within a temporary death sentence due to their incredibly short life cycles. Each cave is a unique entity, born only in winter and destined to self-destruct by melting or collapsing when summer arrives, meaning you can never return to the exact same cave twice in your lifetime. The absence of oxygen under extreme pressure over hundreds of years has compressed the ice so densely that all air bubbles are forced out, creating a brilliant blue darkness that functions like a massive light filter. This landscape represents a paradoxical intersection of fire and ice, where temperatures of over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit from volcanic magma lurk beneath the floor, while millions of tons of ancient ice hang from the ceiling. This breathtaking beauty is a lethal trap because a temperature shift of only 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit can cause thousands of tons of diamond-hard ice to collapse in an instant without any warning. These extreme corners of the world redefine the very concept of an impossible place through their volatile and majestic nature. Angel Falls is the tallest free-falling waterfall on Earth, where water plunges from the edge of the ancient Auyan Tepui Plateau, rising above the Gran Sabana landscape. The waterfall has an uninterrupted free fall of about 2,648 feet, roughly 15 times higher than Niagara Falls, causing the water to break into drifting mist before it can reach the ground as a single stream. Unlike many large waterfalls, Angel Falls is not fed by melting glaciers or a permanent mountain lake, but forms from intense tropical rainfall that collects across the flat surface of the Tepui Plateau. When rainwater gathers on the wide sandstone summit, it flows toward the cliff edge and drops directly into the deep canyon below, creating a waterfall that appears to fall straight from the sky. In 1937, pilot Jimmy Angel attempted to land his Flamingo aircraft on the summit plateau, but the wheels sank into deep mud created by constant rainfall, and he and his companions had to hike for 11 days to escape. Lake Baikal stands as the oldest and deepest freshwater lake on Earth, holding 20% of the planet's unfrozen freshwater supply. This massive volume is so immense that it would take every river in the entire world exactly 1 year to fill its basin to the brim. During the brutal winters, the water's purity creates a crystal-clear ice sheet over 6 feet thick that is strong enough to support heavy trucks and even historic railroad tracks laid directly on its surface. It serves as the unique home for the Nerpa seal, the only freshwater seal species located thousands of miles from the Arctic Ocean, leaving scientists puzzled by their migration history. Giant ice circles reaching 2.5 miles in diameter frequently appear on the lake's frozen surface, yet they are so vast that they can only be fully perceived from satellite imagery or space stations. This extreme environment remains a legendary natural laboratory, where the laws of biology and geology manifest in their most magnificent forms. Phong Nha Kerbang is a magnificent geological wonder comprising over 300 incredibly diverse caves. This area proudly features the massive Sondung, which is large enough to house a 40-story neighborhood standing hundreds of feet tall alongside the spectacular Thien Duong Cave that resembles a palace. This unique structure is nourished by light from massive skylights and a forest covering 90% of the area, helping to preserve countless exquisite pearls. Extreme harshness is also present through its wartime past, when this region endured a massive amount of bombs and artillery. Even today, explorers occasionally still discover unexploded ordnance lying isolated in the deep forest or near the dark cave entrances. Despite that danger, the great hydrological system tirelessly creates underground rivers stretching for many miles that deposit vast sands resembling miniature deserts in the deep abyss. Tianzi Mountain serves as the breathtaking real-life inspiration for the floating peaks in the movie Avatar, featuring over 3,000 sandstone pillars that rise defiantly into the sky. These gravity-defying structures reach heights of nearly 4,000 feet, despite being incredibly narrow, which makes them look like colossal needles piercing the air and appearing as if they could collapse at any moment. Atop these jagged summits, completely isolated from the ground, lies a lonely ecosystem where resilient pine trees grow directly from rock crevices to withstand extreme wind speeds. When a sea of clouds rolls in and blurs the lines of reality, the bases of the pillars vanish, leaving behind what looks like a floating archipelago in a scene that seems physically impossible. To witness this surreal landscape, you can take a cable car ride stretching over 6,500 feet through the mist to look down upon the magnificent stone spires directly beneath your feet. Mount Roraima is the most famous Tepuy Table Mountain in South America, an ancient sandstone plateau formed more than 2 billion years ago with nearly vertical cliffs about 1,300 feet high surrounding its summit. The summit lies exactly at the meeting point of Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana, where a rare triple border marker defines the only place where the 3 national boundaries meet on a mountaintop. Because the plateau has remained isolated at elevations above 9,200 feet for millions of years, its ecosystem developed separately from the surrounding rainforest and savanna. Among the unique animals living there is the tiny Roraima black toad, measuring only about 1 to 1.2 inches long, which lives on wet rock surfaces and moves by crawling instead of jumping. The summit landscape also contains open fields of exposed quartz crystals and dark rock formations shaped by erosion that create a terrain often compared with an alien world. Heavy rainfall across the flat plateau frequently spills over the cliffs as vertical waterfalls, feeding river systems that contribute to major South American watersheds. Moria resembles the sea god's trident, with its extreme, jagged volcanic terrain and claw-like peaks thrusting straight into the deep blue sky. From above, this landmass is split by 2 deep bays that are perfectly symmetrical, creating a brilliant and calm, turquoise shallow lagoon ecosystem. You will be amazed to see wild chickens roaming freely everywhere, from pristine white sand beaches to the courtyards of the most luxurious five-star resorts. This is the largest marine mammal sanctuary on Earth, where humans can legally free dive without cages alongside 88,000-pound humpback whales. In the shallow flats, you will be surrounded by dozens of black-tip sharks and massive stingrays curving and gliding peacefully through the crystal water. Beyond its wild beauty, the surrounding coral reef holds the record as the longest continuously monitored and documented marine ecosystem by international scientists on the planet. Geyser Lake is known as the Eye of the Earth in Siberia, featuring one of the most bizarre and surreal shifting lake beds on the entire planet. This marvel remained sealed for thousands of years and only truly revealed itself after a massive earthquake in 2003 shook the entire Altai region. Underground springs constantly push up green mud and white sand to create massive concentric circles that resemble a giant eye watching the vast sky above. Because the dance of mud and sand changes every single hour,